Hello, everyone. This is Judy Sarian, and on behalf of NASER, the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, I'd like to welcome you today to a special International Armenian Literary Alliance panel discussion exploring the questions of home. This is part of the Literary Lights 2025 series. Today, we're going to have a conversation with the Wasafiri Armenian issue editors and contributors. And this is the second in programs on the Wasafiri issue entitled Armenia Elevation. If you haven't heard the first program, or if you were unable to watch the first program, you can watch it on Yalla's website. The books are available through the Wasafiri website, April Books, and the Armenian Museum of America. And they will also be available soon at NASER. This panel discussion will be followed by a marathon of writing exercises to celebrate Yalla's 4th anniversary, led by contributors to the Wasafiri issue. And everyone is welcome to stay. I would like to introduce Sana Goyal. Sana Goyal is the editor and publishing director of Wasafiri. She has an MA in post-colonial studies and a PhD in literary prizes from SOAS, University of London. Her reviews have appeared in The Guardian, Financial Times, Times Literary Supplement, and elsewhere. She is a judge for the 2025 International Booker Prize. Sana?
Thank you so much, Judith, for that really warm introduction. And it's so wonderful to see so many faces here, so many folks here joining on a Saturday. It's extremely gloomy and gray in Birmingham, as it usually is. But I'm really delighted that we can be in this space together to talk about Wasafiri's special issue on Armenian literature. So I'll say a little bit about Wasafiri and about the special issue, and what a pleasure it was to work with guest editors Tatevik and Naneh on this special issue of the magazine. And otherwise, I'm just really looking forward to listening to you all speak about this huge question of home and what it means to you all as well. So for 40 years, Wasafiri has remained wedded to the unbounded vision of writing across worlds with which it began, continuing to introduce readers to the best in international writing and committed to promoting the freshest talents in open spaces, we hope, for reading and writing across borders and imagining diverse possibilities for belonging. As some of you may know, Wasafiri is a quarterly magazine, and for every alternate issue, so each summer and each winter, we invite guest editors to commission and curate and to help us steer the Wasafiri wheel, as it were. This can sometimes be a very daunting process, but as working with Tatevik and Naneh on this special issue on Armenian literature has taught me and the entire team, it can also be really richly rewarding, as I hope you'll see when you read the issue yourselves. It's been a beautiful, inspiring, and humbling journey for all of us at Wasafiri. The deep care, the dedication, the passion, the excitement that they have brought to the issue has been really admirable to witness. And I'm really delighted that this issue, which in their words sheds light through the ruptures, is now part of Wasafiri's history and our archives. This has been our best-selling issue for 2024. I'm sure you've heard this at other events about the issue before. So much so that an issue has sold in the last 10 minutes whilst I've been on this Zoom call. And I encourage you to really check it out. I want to say a little bit, and I'm pulling here from the editorial to the issue, and what the guest editors found in the process of commissioning and curation, that they found this common theme emerge. And they write here, practically every text talks about rootedness, being grounded, anchored, and moored. And I hope we'll have a chance to discuss this, to talk about home that's real and imagined or symbolic, to talk about language as home, our love for home and the loss of home, home as geography and community, and what it means to be displaced from your homeland or to not feel at home. So thank you so much for having me as a part of this conversation today. And Judith, I'll pass it back to you to introduce Tatevik and Naneh. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. Yes, I'd like to introduce Tatevik Ayvazyan, who is a London-based writer and producer with Rebel Republic Films, a co-founder of London's Armenian Film Festival, and the former director of the Armenian Institute. She is the producer of the award-winning poetry film Tanyel and is currently adapting Iris Murdoch's The Italian Girl. She's a board member of the International Armenian Literary Alliance, focusing on translation projects, and of Azad Archives. Naneh Hovhannisyan is an Armenian-born researcher and writer of book reviews and personal essays. She is interested in history, memory, loss, and belonging. And with that, I will turn it over to Tatevik and Naneh.
Thank you very much, Judith. Thank you, friends. Thank you for attending. Thanks, huge thanks to our contributors for agreeing to take part in this discussion. And a massive thank you to Sana for that warm, generous introduction. It's been a pleasure for us working on this issue as well. It's gone on for years, and yet it all feels like a blink of an eye. I wanted to talk a little bit about the main themes in the issue, but with a highlight on home, as we've heard. It kept emerging and emerging, unannounced, uninvited, unplanned. When we began putting together the contents with my co-editor, Tatevik, we thought about pool of writing which speaks to the main issues in contemporary Armenian contexts. And I say contexts because we meant it as a pluralistic phenomenon, as a thing that exists both in the Republic of Armenia and outside in various diasporas, as well as in the Republic of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh at the time. And we started curating an issue which would give an idea with some depth to a general reader in the Anglosphere of Armenian issues, Armenian poetry, Armenian fiction, specifically short stories, reviews of books on Armenian themes or by Armenologists. And gradually, as the thing took shape, events beyond our control also had a cruel hand, by which I mean the 2020 second Nagorno-Karabakh war happened, and it was followed in 2023 by the tragic, unprecedented de-Armenianization, as in forced expulsion of the entire population of Artsakh. And operating on this background, Tatevik and I had to decide what to highlight, A, what to highlight, and B, whether what is highlighted is going to be somewhat representative of somewhat the majority literary culture, which is an incredibly tall order. So we did what we could. We consulted left, right, and center. We talked endlessly. We discussed. And today we have the pleasure of honing in on this topic of home with 4 incredible contributors, one of whom it is no less than a miracle that she is alive. And we will come to Shoger Sargsyan and we'll speak to her in more detail about her idea of home and homeland. But before we do that, I'd like Tatevik to introduce all 4 of our panelists.
Thank you, Naneh. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you to Yala, Nasser, and Zohrab Center for hosting us, and Sana huge thank to you and the team for hosting us for so long on the pages of the magazine. We have, it's, you know what, it's such hard work we've been doing some events, planning some events, and deciding which pieces to focus on. It's hard work. It's like choosing your favorite children among our 53 children. But we have four of our amazing, talented, beautiful participants here. Shover Sargsyan, like Naneh explained, is one of our contributors whose piece is probably most important and urgent in Wasafiri, because she has actually experienced what it means to lose home within last year. But we're incredibly honored that she agreed to write about it very bravely, very courageously. We knew Shover's name when she was running a podcast during the blockade in Artsakh with her friend Ninel, and we approached them with hesitation, with nervousness, but we're so happy, we're so blessed, Shover, to have your piece. And I'd like to mention your translator as well, Margaret. I think she's on the call as well, who did a fantastic job of translating Shover's beautiful, beautiful emotional Armenian, and she put all that emotion in English. Our next contributor is Sylvia. Sylvia's participation in the magazine was a funny one. I knew Sylvia as an ethnomusicologist, huge fan of her work, and Naneh read and loved her book as well. And we asked her to write an academic article about Komitas, and it ended up being about Komitas somehow. But in September 23, like all of us, she was so affected by everything happening in Artsakh and Armenia. It somehow became one of the most emotional pieces we had in the magazine. I think we cried over it for a month until we started editing it. Thank you for that, Sylvia. It's beautiful, and she talks about music being her home. It's an incredibly interesting exploration of home. Mirna Tuzcan, she's a scholar, and she had a very difficult task because she had 3 very different books to review. Talar Shahinyan's fantastic book on Western Armenian literature, Stateless, an anthology of all sorts of stories about diaspora, and a photography book by Ara Oshakan with the Krikor Peltian introduction. But somehow Mirna very calm is her trademark, said fine. She went away and came back with most accomplished, very interesting, super interesting review. You don't need to know the books to enjoy her review. Go and read it. It's just brilliant. And Armen, I don't know where are you. I don't see your face. Armen was the last addition to the magazine. Sana, you would remember the story. We had too much poetry in the magazine, and I have only myself to blame for that. And Armen's book was going to come out. I'd seen a few poems. So we asked Sana, saying, can we squeeze in a few more poems? But it was too late, and I don't think it was going to happen. But then you heard about the book, Sana, if I'm right, and you got in touch with us saying, I've heard this thing is coming out, Palace of 40 Pillars. And we squeezed in a last-minute interview of Armen and the fantastic writer Fatma Shams. So read the interview, then go and read the Armen's poetry collection, or in different order. And Armen has a lot to say about home as well. So these are our people, but I'll stop talking. Let's see them. Let's hear from them.
Thank you. So my first question would be to everyone. The question is, what is home to you, and where is home now? If we can start with Sylvia, please. And whilst you're pondering on that, Sylvia, I'll read a brief bio of yours. Sylvia Angelique Alajaji is the author of Music and the Armenian Diaspora, Searching for Home in Exile. She is currently serving as Associate Director of the CNRSU Chicago International Research Center for Fundamental Discovery at the University of Chicago. Alajaji is the author of The Evenings in Diaspora, one of the 5 pieces of life writing in the issue Armenians Elevation.
Thank you so much, Naneh and Tato. I could use my whole time allotted to just talk about what an honor it has been to be a part of this journal, and especially with all the people that are here, and getting to work with Tato and Naneh has been just something I will cherish for the rest of my life. So very quickly to answer this question, I'll give you a little bit of background, which I'll talk about later as well. But my family's from Beirut. It's like so many Armenians here, both my grandparents orphaned in the genocide, and so, I mean, both sides. And so, but I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which for those of you in the United States, or not in the United States, Tulsa is what they call part of the flyover country. So the part that most people skip over when they're flying to the both coasts of the US or to Chicago, where I am now. So this question of home has always sort of been something that I've thought about. And my answer to the question is sort of ties into what Tato said at the beginning about sort of how my piece ended up the way that it was. So Beirut had just experienced that horrific explosion. Artsakh the war was going on. And at the same time, right around when this piece was due, my husband and my daughter were assaulted in Chicago. They're fine now, but it was a moment in my life where everything that I felt I held dear was just, nothing felt safe anymore. Everything was going. And so this sort of subconsciously was something that I was thinking about. Where is the place where I can breathe? And I realized that, somewhat, this won't be a surprise considering my work is on music, but how much sound, whether it's the sound of my daughter's voice, the sound of my husband's voice, the sound of my parents, and how much we depend on things like the telephone and FaceTime, just how much voices mean to me in terms of creating home. And I heard somebody say once, now with texting, they lost a parent and they said that they have a message from their parent on their phone and they just keep this message. Because that sound, the way that it helps connect them to a world that maybe defies our material and physical reality. So sound to me has really become one of the fundamental ways that I can experience the home of my imagination, whether it's the songs I remember from childhood, soundscapes that remind me of somewhere else. I'll sometimes have a moment in Chicago where I'll hear construction and I'll go, oh, that reminds me of Beirut, and like immediately it'll just bring me back there. So I find myself really living in sound sometimes in order to help forge that connection to the home of my imagination, which truly never existed. Sorry, that was my very long answer, but yeah, music and sound have been something very powerful to me.
Sylvia, thank you. If you read Sylvia's essay, there's a lot of music recommendations as well, from from classical to modern Armenian. Mirna, I want to move to you next. To introduce Mirna properly, she holds a PhD in comparative literature from UCLA. She's a lecturer in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at US Berkeley. Her current research examines 20th century Armenian literature in the context of cross-cultural encounters. And as I mentioned, she is the author of our review essay called Delimiting Diaspora. Mirna, you've been reviewing other people's works, but let's hear about your poems. And also, I'm curious in your interest in Soviet Armenian and Eastern Armenian literature. Are you finding a home in it as well?
Thank you, Tatevik and Naneh. I just want to quickly say that what seemed to be an impossible task of reviewing 3 generically different books, extremely different books, was made possible really by your guidance. So thank you. It was such a joy working with you. I would say that home has, at least growing up, home was always kind of a fraught concept for me, knowing my family's history, knowing that my grandfather was exiled from his home in Anteb, that he tried to return several years later. You know, he had kept the key of his home, key to his home. And so he would return in the 20s only to have to leave again due to another round of massacres. And that he would keep that key till his last day. And also knowing that my father lived a third of his life in 3 different countries, Syria, Lebanon, and the US. But over time, I started to, I guess, develop a kind of diasporic notion about home that is not really about like a specific place. I live in Los Angeles and I call it home. But I really feel that home is where my family, friends, and community are. And I'll just add, you know, about Eastern Armenian. The reason why I started studying Eastern Armenian is because I went to Armenian school in Los Angeles. And one of the things we were always told is that Armenia is your home. And on my first visit to Armenia in 1998, I found that I was Odar, I was foreign. I wasn't looked at as an Armenian. And there was also this, I think, a kind of a language barrier. And so I decided that I have to study Eastern Armenian to kind of ease that barrier.
That's fascinating. That's so interesting. The idea of literature and language as being home, and also the idea of being diasporic, feeling like a natural, homely state. Thank you for that, Mirna. Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to Shoger now. Shoger Sarkisyan is a reporter, TV host, and actor from Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. Together with her friend, she's the co-creator and co-host of the podcast Inadu. Following the forced expulsion of Armenians from Artsakh in 2023, she resides in Yerevan, where she has begun her first literary attempts. And she has authored Dear Shoger, Letters to Myself, a piece of life writing translated from her native Eastern Armenian into English by Margarit Ordukanyan for our issue. Thank you, Shoger. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. There is such echo in this room, so I hope it doesn't bother you. Hello again, my dear, my lovely people. It's nice to meet you and nicer to meet you in this format. I want to sincerely thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Naneh, thank you, Tatevik, and thank you all the people who helped me to be with you this day. This is an incredible honor to see my work in the pages of such a significant journal, and it's even a greater honor to and it was a real joy to collaborate with you, to work with you. In many ways, this was a really life-changing experience for me. Maybe I'll talk about it later. So also, please excuse my English, it's not the best. I hope you can understand me despite my pronunciation and poor vocabulary. And also, I get really, really nervous till these days when I talk about home. So bear with me, please. It's hard to talk about home in any languages, even in my native one. So let me just introduce myself again in the way Artsakh people do it now these days. Hello, I'm Shoghel from Artsakh, from the city of Stepanakert. I lived on Tatevik Street, house number 42, you know, the one behind the city police department. Yeah, where the technical college used to be. So when you meet an Artsakh native, they will always ask where you're from, not just the region, but the exact place. And then inevitably they'll ask where exactly your home was. Maybe they will ask you even what it was like. This is my favorite part. So I wondered why this is so important to people from Artsakh to ask about where their house, their home was. Maybe we just want to talk about home to make it not only our past, but also our present. Or maybe it's the simple way from Artsakh to say, I understand you. But I think there is something more. Talking about home is an essential part of introducing yourself, because home is a part of who you are. You just can't truly tell your story without mentioning the place you were from. I really think that without that you feel incomplete. Home is belonging, and that is one of the most beautiful feelings for me. And here is also one interesting thing. I've been deprived of the ability to be home, yet that doesn't change the fact that we still belong to each other. I am a person of that home, and that home is mine. If I had understood this earlier, maybe it would have been just a little bit easier for me to bear the loss. And for the longest time, I believed that home was a place you could always long for and always return to. But for almost 2 years now, my desires and my reality haven't aligned, so I can't physically be home, and yet strangely, I don't feel homeless. I've come to realize that home is also a state of mind. The home of my soul still stands on Tatevik Street. Its gate still creaks. No one can take it away from me. No one can forbid me from being there, because it exists in memory and not on the map. That means home is not about the ability to return for me, but mostly about the desire to return. So the fact that my home is now something about state of soul or a state of mind, and not the building, the physical in the physical world. It also has its downsides, of course. I probably won't be able to invite you over for tea at my soul's doorstep. But this is what I mean. Home is a state of mind for me. Thank you.
Oh, Shoghel, thank you. Thank you. I think you made everyone cry. Thank you for being able to joke and share these stories with a smile on your face. We're truly lucky to have someone like you amongst us. Thank you very much. Armenian, moving on to you. Let me read your bio first while you're thinking about the answer. So Armen is the author of a very beautiful poetry collection called The Palace of 40 Pillars. Please go and read it if you haven't. He's also the translator from Persian of Hopscotch by Fatima Shams, who also interviewed Armen for the magazine. Armen grew up in Isfahan, Iran, and now he's a PhD candidate in English at Stanford University. We have a short interview with him in the magazine called The Past of the Future. Armen, I want you to answer this question, but yesterday I was rereading your interview, preparing this, and you say, home is something I both long for and find deeply sinister. Home is an enclosed space. And I was talking about this with your fellow poet, Arthur Kaitsakian, in the morning. And he said, he's such a cynical guy. He said, this guy, how can you call home sinister? So tell us what your home is and why do you say that?
Thank you, Tatevik, for zeroing in on probably the most problematic part of the interview. It's a it's an honor to be in this company, and thanks all of you. Thanks to all of you. I thought so. I just sort of very briefly biographically, I grew up in Isfahan, Iran. I love the specificity that Shogar you sprinkled into your answer, and I was thinking I have this poem in the book that's titled after the address of the home we grew up in, 27 Marjan Street. I think Marjan means shell in Persian, or coral rather. And sort of 2 blocks down from that was Ararat Cultural Club. It's just sort of this sporting and cultural complex in Isfahan. And I feel like we had a very sort of almost like a miniature version of what happens in Armenia, is where you can be at home, but you can only see Ararat. You can't go there. And I've always found that image sort of moving, that home is somehow always on the horizon. It's always elsewhere, even though we associate it with the inside. So I wanted to read to you this very brief quotation by a Kashmiri poet, Agha Shahid Ali, who writes, "If home is found on both sides of the globe, home is of course here, and always amidst land." So Ali spent half of his life in Kashmir near Pakistan and India, and then half of his life here. But I find this idea that once you've lived in more than one place, you kind of can't belong to any single place extremely moving. And I think, just to wrap this up, Tatevik, when I was working on my answers for that interview, I feel like it's obviously words mean different things in different contexts, and I'm almost kind of I don't know. It's hard to talk about how home is sinister in a context like this, but I think the context back then was sort of all the ways in which home here, at least in the States, is used to sort of police people, and the idea of who gets to be at home and who is houseless. And there is I think at the time there's this website called Nextdoor. It's kind of like Facebook, but mostly for you have to have an address to be able to get on it. So it's a sort of oddly exclusionary way of running like a social media app. And what ends up happening on it is a lot of like complaints or warnings about what somebody might consider is happening in the neighborhood that's unsavory. So I don't know. Happy to talk more about this, but I think that's what that's where the sinister aspect came from for me. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Armen. That's food for thought. Can we talk about this duality of being calling a place a home and yet feeling not feeling at home? With whoever would like to add something to this discussion, because all of you, in Shogar's case, it's in Armenia, but not in Artsakh. In your case, Sylvia, Tulsa, Oklahoma, with parents from ethnic Armenian parents from Lebanon, whose roots go back to Ottoman Turkey. Mirna, in your case, similar story. This duality, or even, you know, more of the branching out. What do you think? What is it that in this rupture makes people write, create, and speak about it so loudly? In other words, is there creative material in this, and how do you work with it? How do you go about making it into art, and what do you think there is that is nourishing in it? Anyone, just unmute yourselves if you'd like to speak.
I think that's why, Naneh, that I'm so drawn to sound as sort of as a way of accessing home. I know growing up in Tulsa, you know, I didn't have a language to express the placelessness that I felt. You know, I was so jealous of my cousins in LA, in New York, you know, where at least like there was something that existed that explained being from an immigrant background in a major city, or, you know, my cousins in Beirut or wherever they were. You know, there was something, and not that they don't have their own sorts of ways of processing this disconnection, but to be in a town that didn't have many Armenians, that also wasn't sort of given a language to express that in-betweenness. And so for me, sound, it's difficult to sound travels, sound can be, it's so elastic and can subsume so many different ways of being. And also for me, I was going to read an excerpt, but I don't think we have time, but you know, it also for me grabs the complexity of being Armenian. Like the thing I don't like about how diasporic music is usually talked about, like it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that, but that necessitates a watering down of this and that. And my sound world in Tulsa, you know, I would go to one home and there would be gomidas playing. We would go to another home and there was adis playing. And they represent different Armenias, different ways of being Armenian, different histories, different time frames, all of that. And so, yeah, so for me, I think creativity is almost a necessity in trying to express home, because what we've been given doesn't allow us to express the where we might be sort of up here in terms of what home means to us up here.
Yes, I like that. Trying to escape the being pinned down.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so much of that pinning down, I think, also results in a feeling of further disconnection. And so I do want to, you know, I do agree with what Anmen was saying about that sometimes home can be sinister, because you look and you're like, oh, well, the home as it's being represented is not one that has room for me. And so I think, you know, there is sort of that tension sometimes. And when we're thinking about the languages that do exist around us. And so I often think about ways of defining a home that surpass those more tangible things.
Thank you. Anything to add, Shorer? Would you like to add anything? Or...
Honestly, sometimes I feel really grateful because technically we have an apartment in Yerevan and we have a roof over our heads, and thanks God my whole family is with me and they are safe. And we have neighbors who sometimes are really kind to us. But I really don't feel me at home. So I was thinking why this house in Yerevan isn't home for me, and why I feel that my home in Stepanakert it's so important and irreplaceable for me, that I want to talk and share the story of my home with other people. So I think for me, the history carried by those walls, they held life more than one generation of it. So no other apartment or house or some building like that, has absorbed the sweat of my great-grandfather labor into its foundation. No other home has the tree under which my young grandfather sat for his exams. And no other home has the room where my mother read me bedtime stories while I traced the cracks on the walls. So home is my story, and only it can tell about the real me, that one, the most important part, that has no masks, nothing to hide, to pretend to play. And if I'm being completely honest, I can share a secret with you. You see, I've always believed that our house was alive. I would miss it with some kind of like miss us when we left, sulk when we were gone for too long, and it would be happy when good people visited us. So maybe I was just a kid and with a vivid imagination, but I honestly always thought of the house as my great-grandfather, Tatevik, the man who built it. I never met him actually, but I was told he was tall, handsome, strict, yet incredibly kind and fair man. I thought exactly like our house. And the feeling that home is something alive has never left me. So that's why home to me is not just a place where you feel good, it's also a place you want to care for. And it's the only place where I once stood for hours trying to paint over the cracks in the walls with the sunflowers and gouache. So for me, it was kind of necessity at the time to write about home. I wasn't thinking about getting a creative life writing or something like that. I was, at that time, there was very strange emotions and all the kinds of emotions all together that I was feeling at that time. But also at the time I thought that the history that this home carries in its walls, it's worth telling about, and it was telling it to people, and I really wanted people to know where I lived and what I call home. So, but it turned out to be a really good essay for me, so thank you, you helped a lot in that. And to be completely honest, I really wish that this is the last piece when I write about my home in case of war, pain, struggle, loss, and again pain. I really hope that one day I will be capable enough to tell about my home in cases of peace. And all the great pride emotions that I feel, because when I talk about home, I never think about the war and the loss and my not ability to be there, but I really think about all the good emotions and experiences. In my childhood, it was very good time for me. So I hope one day I could will have an opportunity to tell you about my home in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Shoresh. Thanks very much. That's interesting, isn't it? On the one hand, we talk about home being unspecified, non-defined, non-territorial. And on the other hand, we hark after the specific physical, actually, object of the house. And this reminded me of the art piece in the magazine, in the issue of the Wasafiri, which basically surveys the tradition of the memory book, in which generations of Armenians try to recreate or miniaturize their homes, the lost homes, in fact, quite often in physical terms, as in the surrounding landscape, in the plans of the building. That's fascinating. I'm going to hand you over to Tatevik for the last bit of the discussion, and we hope we can open up the floor to questions.
Yeah, God, I have so many questions, and time is just flying in your beautiful presence. But if you have to the audience as well, please put your questions in the chat. Armin, did you want to add anything to this question about that Naneh asked about the reality of home and
I guess I'll just say it's kind of impossible not to write about home in poetry. The word stanza, which is like a section of a poem, comes from the Italian for room. And this has always been one emblem for me on one side. And then on the other hand, there's a word in Persian for the repeating parts of a poem that's called radif. And it comes from, it used to mean in Arabic, the person that rides behind another person on a horse or a donkey. So, so you have like this very like stable room, and then on the other side you have like a kind of more nomadic existence. And it's kind of, I feel like, impossible to write poems without addressing both parts. But yeah,
You know
very
what? It's the same in Armenian. I never thought about it. Stanza is tun. It means home or house. I never thought about it. That's incredible.
How do you say
Lovely.
stanza
It's
in
a
Western
lovely
Armenian?
house to live in
It's
poetry.
both in Western and Eastern, dun. Dun or tun.
Yeah. Mirna, speaking of Western and Eastern, how do we, as a literary expert, how do we write about home in these two literary traditions? Are they different? Home, as in being in Armenia, let's say you work on Soviet Armenian literature, and diasporic home, like you reviewed Stateless.
I think we can talk about general categories actually that apply to both Eastern and Western Armenian literature. You have, as we've been hearing, home as loss, home as yearning, home as a window onto the past, home as a reflection of the self, as a destination to strive for. Language as home, I think, is big in both Eastern and Western Armenian. Home as family, and maybe as by extension as nation. And also, as we've been hearing again, diaspora as home / homeland, which is maybe the most radical idea.
Thank you, Mirna. Thank you. All these homes, whether it's music, whether it's a physical address, whether it's a poetry stanza, probably my favorite. That's a lovely place.
Tato, can I throw in one more thing? Just when Mirna was listing, I also think of home as existing in the future. And so something like, you know, home, the home that can be, you know, like the home that might be, that may be. And so sometimes I think the worlds we create for ourselves are also looking forward as much as they are back. You know, there's sort of a hopefulness too when we think about creating home. If it doesn't exist in the present and there was something in the past, what are we going to bring into the future? And so I think very much as forward look at home to me is also looking forward as well. So yeah, so futurity to me is always latent or is always at the surface when we have this discussion.
What a lovely, hopeful conclusion to our meeting, Sylvia. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining from your respective homes and rooms and sharing Wasafiri pages with us, which became our home for a bit. Thanks to all the organizations who hosted us. Thank you, Sana, for joining. And please check not only our issue, but everything else Wasafiri publishes, because it's wonderful. Go and subscribe, check out Yala's work, Nasser's work, Sohrab Center's work. Seek out what our contributors are doing, follow them, they're all wonderful. And we're going to stay and write because when we were working on Wasafiri, we wanted everyone to read and write even more. So please stay on this call. Some of our contributors will stay with some fantastic prompts. And thank you. And I think Julie is going to say a few words now. I'm going
to jump in. Thank you so much to our panelists for this heartfelt discussion, and Sylvia for ending on a hopeful, forward-looking note. You've all given me so much to think about, and I think I have not cried in a Yala event as much as I have today. So thank you to Tato and Naneh for bringing this issue to life with so much love and dedication. Thank you, Sana, and everyone at Wasafiri for giving us all a platform. As Armenians, being heard, being listened to is not something we take for granted. So being able to come together in a magazine like Wasafiri means more to all of us than you know. So welcome to our big Armenian family. Thank you, Judy Saryan and Nasser and the Zorab Center for making Literary Lights this series possible. Thank you, as always, to Hovsep, Nairi, and everyone at Yala for creating a home for all of us. The next event in our Literary Light series will feature Nancy Krikorian and her new novel, The Burning Heart of the World, which I'm really, really excited about. If you have not pre-ordered it, please do so. You won't be disappointed. She is just an incredibly poetic and beautiful writer, which you know from Wasafiri's magazine. The event will take place in person at Nasser and online on Tuesday, April 15th at 7:30 Eastern. We're going to break for a few minutes and then reconvene to celebrate Yala's 4th anniversary with a series of writing prompts. Grab a notebook, grab a cup of tea, and I will see you in a few. Thank you all.